Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Suna Caracas. I am the country director of the Hunger Projekt in Germany. And I welcome you warmly to our third webinar of this year, of our webinar series, Corporate Empowerment Agenda 2030. So today's topic is the transformation of food systems in the context of global crises. And we have about 60 minutes for our talk today, which will focus on Africa's food systems and potential approaches for successful transformation. And we have a great lineup of expert speakers today who I will introduce them to you in a little while. And I would like to first say, to get us started, a few words about the topic of food insecurity and state of hunger so we can set the context for our conversation today. So many of you may be familiar with the latest SOFI report. It's the UN published report on the state of food security and nutrition in the world. It was published recently with an updated number on the people and the millions of people worldwide who are still going to bed hungry today. The number is up to 783 million. And after world hunger steadily declined for a decade, and we saw the global community making progress on these goals, it has now been dramatically on the rise again, affecting nearly 10% of the global population today. So that number, to me, is simply astounding. And the report points out to the major drivers of food insecurity and malnutrition. So we know that the COVID pandemic, economic shocks have contributed to increased poverty and hunger, as well as to rising inequalities. Yet at the same time, more frequent and extreme climate events are also disrupting supply chains worldwide, especially in low-income countries. We currently also have the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict involving two of the biggest global producers of staple cereals, gas, fertilizer, and that conflict is also disrupting supply chains further, affecting rising prices in all sorts of areas, grain, fertilizer, energy. And the food supply chains are affected by all of these global crises. And when we look at, we just talked about the number of 783 million people worldwide suffering of food insecurity and hunger. Now, the right to food is a fundamental human right. It is the right not only to eat, but the right to have regular, permanent, and also unrestricted access to food. And what we see on one hand is our global food system fails at this for hundreds of millions of people worldwide who are faced by food insecurity. So we need to talk about this very urgent and important topic because we're now, through these global crises, seeing more clearly the ripple effects that they have on the global food system, and also how irrobust and fragile the system can be. In order to reach our SDG goals, many experts would agree that we need to transform and take a look at the food systems, among many other interventions. And that's why we selected this topic for today's webinar. And what I would like to do first, before we engage our expert speakers, I will briefly pass on now to my colleague Vincent Gründler, who is our Director of Advocacy and Transformation Researcher at the Hunger Projekt Germany. He has been engaging and working on this topic of fighting world hunger for close to 30 years. And he will briefly talk us through about what potential changes may be needed along with the transformation of food systems in order to reach our SDG goal 2, which is ending hunger by 2030. So with that, I will pass on to you, Vincent.
Yes, thank you, Suna, and welcome everybody. Glad to see that so many people are joining us, and good to see some very familiar faces and also new faces. Yeah, so actually to correct you, Suna, I have been working in the Hunger Projekt with the Hunger Projekt for 39 years already. Yes, and I'm a political
Thank you for correcting.
And yeah, let me tell you a little bit about how we are doing on SDG number 2, which is about ending hunger by the year 2030. Do you see my slides now? Do you see the slide with the 17 goals now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. So this is the overview. I will not go into this. Obviously, I have only 5 minutes time to make a short introductory presentation. But let me just add a few facts regarding access to food, which is obviously the most important goal of any food system. It should give all people, even the marginalized people, the poor people, access to food. And here's some additional facts is that 2.4 billion people, and mostly the majority of those are women and people in rural areas, do not have consistent access to nutritious, safe, and sufficient food. That is numbers from last year from this SOFI report. And in addition, to achieve the zero hunger goal, how are we doing? We are doing badly. There have been backlashes because of the crises that Suna was mentioning. And we need, that is calculated by IFAD, the UN agency, we would need an additional $400 billion of investment per year in food systems to improve food systems. And that means that efforts must be doubled in half the time that we have left until the year 2030. But not doing anything would cost us much, much more. That is $12 trillion. So there is no other option than for urgent action. Yeah, and then there is another report that looked at what would be the most effective interventions to end hunger. And there's 3 categories of interventions. The first one is to empower the excluded, which is very much in the forefront of our work, obviously, of the Hunger Project for so many years. And these are all the interventions related to social protection, institutions such as farmers' organizations, and also education, especially through agricultural vocational training. And on the farm interventions, this includes everything provided directly to the farmers, including farm inputs, but also research, agricultural research and development, and improved livestock feed and irrigation infrastructure. And then the third category is food on the move. So these are all the interventions to reduce harvest losses, reduce waste. Very important is the storage of food, and and to improve returns from sales, and a mix of measures that are needed to strengthen small and medium enterprises and cooperatives, traders, to reach all of these different important stakeholders in the food supply chain. And the last slide would be that what Suna already said, that food system transformation, fortunately, is becoming more and more of a priority in international development cooperation. And that is, it sounds so logical and obvious, but it was not in the forefront. It was not such an important priority for many, many years or decades. So this is fortunate, but also it's very urgent. And there's this, maybe you heard about the European Union so-called farm to fork strategy. Here in the graph, you have an overview of what is included in this strategy. And it's basically to provide sustainable food systems globally. And a lot of programs have been started from the German government and other European governments to support this strategy or to implement it. And very recently, 2 months ago, in Rome, there was a UN Food System Summit +2 stock-taking meeting. So the UN, the big food system summit happened 2 years ago, and now 2 years later, 3,300 participants from all over the world, they have met in Rome. And yeah, I was not present personally, but friends of mine, colleagues of mine, and they told me that unfortunately there was still not much reports on a real transformational momentum. So that is still missing. And also missing is to implement those principles that we will hear about now from our experts in the coming interview. And hopefully also you will have questions from the plenary regarding what are the guiding principles that we need to transform food systems. And yeah, what can we do from here? Okay, with that, I hand back to Suna.
Great. Thank you, Vincent, for also setting the stage for us on this topics. I would now like to invite you, Vincent, along with me, to now engage our two expert speakers who are with us today. Let's welcome everyone, Mr. Jörg Migende, who, yes, thank you for waving, who is an agricultural expert and the managing director of the Deutscher Raiffeisenverband in Berlin. It's an association that represents the interests of over 1,700 cooperative-oriented companies in the German agricultural and food industry. So we're very excited to have you join us and provide us with your inputs and perspectives. And please
Thank you for having me.
Yes, great. And please also warmly welcome Mr. Rowlands, who is the Global Vice President and Director of Africa and Mexico at the Hunger Projekt. Rowlands oversees the program strategy in our global organization of the Hunger Projekt, and he directly supervises our 9 THP program country offices in Africa and Mexico. So he's dialing in today from Malawi in Southern Africa and has worked with the Hunger Projekt for close to 22 years. Welcome, Rowlands.
Thank you, Suna. Happy to be here.
Great. So let's get started with the questions to both of you. First questions to Mr. Migende. To end hunger, the recent UN Food Security Nutrition Report calls for agri-food systems transformation and local solutions in developing countries. How do you think that is relevant for Africa? And what do you think exactly needs to be transformed so we can sustainably end hunger?
Yeah, thank you very much, Suna. Well, I'm not African. I just spent a few years in several African countries, and I don't have that much experience than Rowland. So I think it's much more important to listen to Rowland, because my first point is that we are not in the role to think about how Africa should develop. I think the Africans and the African countries has to give us their strategy, and if they like that they have to exchange knowledge with us, they are more than welcome. For me, it's very important here that we don't say here in Germany, we have to do agriculture in this or that way. That leads me to my second point. That there's no one Africa. Yeah? We have 45 countries with more than 45 cultures and languages and tribes and climate situation, natural resources, access to water, and so on. So we need really local strategies, or at least on a country level, to develop the food system and agriculture in these countries. Well, but to take some action, I see five bullet points from my experience. The first one is education of modern sustainable agriculture and management of farms. The second one is access to credits, or let's say microcredits, and to increase creditworthiness especially for smallholder farmers. The third one, very important, access to information, especially market information. I saw that in Zambia, that an app which just show the prices for goat meat in the towns help the people, the farmers in the local area to increase their margins. Yeah? If you have a transparency in the market, it's better for smallholder farmers. The fourth point is to understand agriculture as a business. It's not a romantic thing. Why I say that? Because especially we like to keep the young people in the countryside to become farmer. And I don't like this view on Africa that they're only poor and that they're a problem. No, the young people like to make business. And if they don't have the perspective to earn money with agriculture, they will not keep in the countryside. From my small experiences in South Africa and Zambia and Rwanda and Ghana. And the fifth point is, and Vincent mentioned that as well, don't focus only on farm. You have to focus on the up and downstream sector as well. So we have to develop the whole value chain from farm to fork. Yeah, I like that pictures. Well, these are my 5 points, and I think we come back to that later in more detail.
Great, thank you. Rowlands, what would you like to say to this question?
Thank you. Let me start with acknowledging Mr. Migende on your words. The respect in your statements, and this is not just linguistic. I hear you on the respect of Africa can feed itself, and that will be my first point today. Let us make local food systems work, and let us invest in grow local agenda. What do I mean by that? The continent of Africa has tremendous resources for growing food, and all of us know that it is within the tradition of Africa to grow food, right? And this knowledge, when we have conversations about food systems, this knowledge is often overlooked. And what we see is a great push and focus on making importations of food to Africa efficient. So we see a great push on efficient importations to feed Africa. I'll give an example. In recent years, we have not only seen increased availability of cheap and ultra-processed food in sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, there are clear reports, including from the Lancet, World Health Organization, even the SOFI 2023 has mentioned it, blaming that push of ultra-processed food in sub-Saharan Africa, blaming it on the double burden of nutrition, right? But that's not the only challenge you have seen. We have also seen, you mentioned sooner, the disruption of the food system in Africa with the war in Ukraine. So anything that happens in the global world has that disruption of what happens in a very small village on the corner of the continent of Africa. Now, with those two issues in mind, we have an opportunity here. You will notice that Africa has an opportunity to grow more and healthy and nutritious food to feed the continent. During one of the visits I had in Uganda, I saw it. I met a woman, Farida, there, who showed us a great example of a mixed use household farm in which she was growing different crops, including pumpkins and different other crops. She actually prepared a pumpkin powder and a porridge for us. And me and my colleagues, we sat in there, we ate the best fresh porridge from pumpkin you can imagine about. How with our cooperative colleagues, they were selling those produce to their communities around. And one of the mixed use farm system is that with trees and water resources, livestock and multiple crops, the farms work more in a cycle with nature. And I hear more and more that we should not be a generation that produce and eat as if we are the last generation to exist on Earth. And so it's less destructive for soils and less harmful to water resources. Farida is not alone in Uganda. We see it happening in Zambia. We see it happening in Benin. So that's point number one. Make local food systems work. Let's transform, let's make significant shifts to make local food systems work and support grow local. My second point there is let us recognize and invest in women food farmers and build their resilience. It's undeniable right now as we sit here that, you know, in Africa here, 80% of the food in developing countries is produced by women food farmers, right? And clearly it also documented that actually that's a group of people that struggle with land ownership, that struggle with access to meaningful and productive enhancing inputs and services like credit and all that Mr. Migende mentioned. And yet they are the most impacted group of people when there are shocks and impacts of climate change. But we do know that they are the group of people feeding Africa. Now, what type of transformation do we need to bring to our food systems that will recognize this significant role of women food farmers in Africa? What would that look like? I think those are the type of conversations we should be having and type of real actions we should be having, and not doing things of more of the same. So I'll be able to go into other areas of youth and all those aspects later on in the conversation. But for now, let me mention these two. Let us make local food systems work and support grow local, and let us recognize and invest in women food farmers and build their resilience. Back to you, Suna.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rowlands and Mr. Migende. So this is exactly the second topic that we want to touch is about the how. And about how to organize ourselves, how to organize, how to have a good governance system, a good food system governance in Africa. So how could, that's exactly the question that you just raised, Rowlands, how could a good institutional framework look like on the international, national, and down to the local level? And what are the key issues and bottlenecks to have a functional framework where all farmers, including the small scale holders and the women that you mentioned, how to empower them? Do you want to start, Mr. Migende, again?
Yeah, Vincent, this is a question for hours, days, and years to discuss. I just give you two ideas to your question. The first one is reflecting the McKinsey report. I think Suna or somewhere someone mentioned that, which said we need an increase in income in Africa for everyone to have a good life, enough food, good access to healthcare and so on. So my experiences, especially in Zambia, and I remember a speech of the Minister of Economic and Agriculture, and he said, okay, we're growing cotton, the best cotton in the world, and we export just the cotton to the US, and they make really nice T-shirts. Yeah. So I think we have to increase the margin, the portion of the value added in African countries. So that means we need investments, especially in food processing, to create income. And for this investment, and that's what my experience, but experience of other companies, especially small and medium-sized companies from the Western world, is, but it's the same for enterprises, African enterprise, is we need political stability in the country, in the countries. I don't talk about democracy or something like that. We need political stability. And the second, and that's really, really important, and maybe one of the reasons why why some countries are better performed than other countries in Africa, is a fair and independent legal system. So if you like to invest in Africa, an African country, you have to be sure that it stays your investment, and if you have a legal problem, you get a fair a trial in front of the court. But that's not only an African issue, it's sometimes in Europe an issue as well in some countries. So it's not a specific African issue. But to attract investments, you need a special environment of stability. The second one, Vincent, you mentioned that in this very good overview chart with the 3 pillars, is the organizational setup. Well, especially with smallholders, they are too small to do a professional farming and to get access to the market. And we have to think about, and there are good examples, how we can create some market power and better access to credits. And for me, the cooperative idea, cooperative movement could be one solution for some countries, because cooperative means the local farmer stays on his own, so it's his enterprise, and he do some special task with others together, for example, to buying seeds or to selling, to market their products, and the income stays in the region. Yeah, it's in Germany, it's all over the world, and there are some examples in Africa that this could be an organizational framework which helps to keep farming in the hands of the local, but to be competitive with bigger industrial farms. And for do that, you need something like a cooperative law. Yeah, you need something like an cooperative audit. That was one of the secrets why the cooperative movement, especially in Germany and Austria, grow that much, that a lender for money was always sure that a cooperative is a secure company with open books. Yeah? So there are many things which needs to establish a good cooperative framework, organizational framework in these countries. And there are some examples in Africa, like in Rwanda, where it works. Yeah, and again, Roland, you're so right. Often the best managers are the women of cooperatives. Yeah, because a cooperative is as good as the management to keep the people together and to push them and to motivate them and to promote the cooperative. And I always met women. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Rowlands, what do you have to add?
Thank you. So let me add only 2 there. The first one, I would like to speak to something I'm calling food system governance. Right? And I'm not talking about political governance, right, which our governments are handling. I'm talking about the governance of the food system itself. Okay, when you have your food on your table, or whether you are eating you are seated on the mat, and you see the type of food you have on that table, on that mat, you see a lot of imported food on the dish, on your table. It is time Africa should take a pause and start asking ourselves a question. Who is governing this food system, which places this food on my table? And why am I ending up with a food system in which it is cheaper to buy imported food than to produce locally? And you will experience a tension in that way of thinking. And we will quickly notice that our generation, as we are talking right now, needs to reconcile what appear like 2 antagonistic views, but they should not be. And these are profit for gigantic food businesses and food as a human right. So I would like to present that. Pause, look at your table and ask that question and see who is managing that food system. Who is behind the entire chain supplying and moving that? So that takes me to my second point, which is local leadership. What new evidence do we need as a world, as a generation right now, to accept that local leadership should be the destination of our investment for anything we do, including food system, including food security? Just recently, during the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody, most of us who were in the communities, we ran for our lives. We went to what we considered safest places that we could think about. But something remained right in the local community, and that was the local leadership. They were the people that had to adjust their lives. They watched their loved ones die. They planned burials. They discussed modification of burial arrangements and their culture. They were in that tension. They managed their local food system because there were those bans and all sorts of things that we threw all over without thinking of the context. They took the whole risk and the burden. They managed it. They survived. In short, they stepped into their right space of leadership. And that's where they belong. Now, any development model which does not recognize this truth and does not invest in full respect of that historical truth should be rejected, right? And that should happen everywhere in Germany and all that, because whether the funding comes from there to, those are the pressure, the pressure we should be putting, the demands we should be putting on our governments, right? So the questions we should be asking ourselves now is, with that in mind, what is the role of local leadership in our local food systems? Is it simply a consumer? How do we ensure, for example, when we talk, I like what you said, Miguel, about food farmers being small, right? Smallholder farmers being small. So what models should we be coming up? Is it a model of grab land and displace them? So we create mega farms or what? Or we should ensure a non-displacement of smallholder farmers, that model, which does not displace them, but it actually reorganizes them into a mass production unit so that we achieve the volumes that we are looking for, whether for production purposes or for marketing. That's what we should be thinking about. Otherwise, when we talk of displacement, any model that talks about displacement, it's not only displacing a smallholder farmer, it is actually displacing women. And is that what we want to do? So where is the place of local leadership in our food system management? And how do we invest in ensuring strong food system institutions at local and national level? Back to you, Vincent or Suna.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Suna, I think now it's time to move to the third and last topic of our discussion.
Yes. So one of the other drivers, so first of all, thank you so far for your very interesting insights. It's quite fascinating to see the different perspectives and yet also see a lot of common denominators along the line. Let's move on to another topic of one of the major drivers also of food security and world hunger, which is the impacts of climate change. So we also, Vincent, you also earlier mentioned the topic of food loss and waste, right? Which is one of the bigger outcomes and also very closely related to the climate change effects we are experiencing worldwide. Now, a strong food system also needs to be resilient against climate shocks. So what can we do in terms of strengthening climate resilience? And not only that for the food system, and yet at the same time also ensure we're protecting the environment and biodiversity. Are there perhaps in your work experiences any examples you can share with us of what that could look like to ensure efficient cooperation between key stakeholders when it comes to climate change, resiliency, and food systems? Mr. Migende, you can start if you want.
I think that there's one very important point or aspect which is not really well known, especially among people are not in the agriculture sector. There's always the belief if we in Germany or in Europe or somewhere else in the world will produce less, everything would be fine. Yeah. So, and we don't have to produce so many products here in Germany, and then Africa is safe. That's not true. We need every piece of land, every piece, because the reality is that since 8 years, worldwide, the production is haven't met the consumption. So, and there are a lot of points to make the situation better, to reduce food loss, food waste, all that stuff, to eat less meat and so on. But if someone from Asia or Africa will eat meat because he get more income, how we should prevent that in Germany or in Europe? How arrogant is that to talk these people that they have to behave in another way like we did in Europe? So we can do that, and we have to start here in Germany or Europe, but we have to calculate and have to keep in mind that we need every piece of land in the world which is suitable for farming. So, and is no contradiction that we keep farming here in Europe and to develop farming in Africa, especially in the way like Rowland described that. So that's important. And I'll tell you a short story from last year. I had a meeting with some scientists from SACAO. Rowland, you know that organization. It's the Southern African Farmers Association, so Botswana, Namibia, South Africa. And there's a project here from the German Ministry for Entwicklungszusammenarbeit, which gives these scientists the possibility to develop climate resilient farming practices. And so we had an exchange about that. And I was talking about how to increase food production. They didn't talk about increase food production. They talked about food security. If I do farming, I like to have the harvest at the end of the day. And that's not in every time the case in Africa. In Germany, it's totally clear. Yeah, if we do farming, we do harvest. So, but in the most parts of the of this world, you can't take that for granted that you harvest at the end of the year. So that leads me to your question, and I said that in my answer to the first topic. We have to. No, not we have to. If Africa we can help them to do modern farming. And modern farming means nowadays a mixture of organic, traditional farming methods and modern farming methods like digital farming. Yeah, and that's the answer to reduce, for example, crop protection or fertilizer. Is not to stop to use that things because they're important for food security. No, it's to take less. And we can do that with digitalization. Everyone, I talked about that vision from German NGOs, for example. You are mad. Yeah, they use a cow or an ox to make farming, and you like to talk to them about digital farming, how to reduce the water consumption, irrigation with satellite data and algorithm. We developed a technology in Zambia at Mobuyu Farm. We irrigated the center pivots with data and algorithms, and we decreased water consumption by 30%, and we increased the yield of the wheat. And these are the technologies we should share with Africa, and that attracts young people. Yeah, and don't say we like some kind of romantic agriculture. Rowland, I don't see a contradiction between mega farms and smallholders. Why? My vision is a mega farm owned by smallholders. Yeah, so it's a question of property, because a mega farm can be very productive and profitable, but if they are owned by the smallholders, it brings the money back into the region. So these visions motivate me to work together with Africa, to be honest. Yeah. And we saw that with the internet or the mobile system. There's so many potential in Africa, and we don't have to bring them a technology from the 19th century, to be honest. Yeah, and that's the kind of support I think this should be needed, and attractive for young people to keep in the countryside and to become a farmer. No farmers, no future. Yeah, that's a song I have heard in South Africa at a farmers conference. Yeah, great performance. Yeah, 200 farmers sang this song. I like that. Yeah.
You can sing it for us later if you want.
Yes, I do it together with Rowland, please.
Rowlands, what would you like to add? Great,
thank you. So thank you very much, Migende, those comments. There are a lot of farming practices taking place in Africa right now. What we need is a choice to invest in them and start moving our investments from pilot. So we talk about pilots, we talk about experimentation, we talk about what is the other one? A shore farm. We talk about demonstration farm. We talk about what we need is a massive investment in those methodologies, technologies that are working. All right, and they are there. We have experimented with them in Africa. Mixed farm example I gave of Farida, the mixed Farida in Uganda, the mixed farm method. It's there. You walk in that village, you'll be amazed. And she is producing with her colleagues. They are producing food, knowing that they are not the last generation to eat and to produce and eat from the planet. That's what we have to talk about. So there are a lot of technologies in methodologies in biodiversity that are taking place right now in Africa. But the other challenge I've seen is everybody wants to keep on piloting new things and not take time and say, how do we invest massively in that which has worked? It's like we want a brand to say, we came up with this, and then our badge of honor ends at, we came up with this in Africa, and then it ended there, right? So I would like to really push, in that direction, build the capacity of the smallholder farmers, all right, to mitigate and to be able to adapt, right? And as you put it lastly, Migende, you mentioned about the young people. Yeah, how do we keep the young people on the farm? So there are also technologies. I've seen it in Kenya, started in Kenya, in Nigeria, now it's in Uganda. Hello Tractor, for example. It's a great model, which is great because Africa continues to farm in the old way of farming. And how do we shift that in a way that it is respectful to the land ownership and all that? And I found the Hello Tractor approach really great. It's in Nairobi, in Kenya, Uganda, and Nigeria, where they have an investment system into the ownership of a tractor. But because it makes economically no sense for every smallholder to own a tractor. So what happens is one person, like an entrepreneur, a young person, owns a tractor, but it provides that labor to everyone around that vicinity. They have a booking agent who manages it on the app, like the way you do Uber, right? And then they have an operator, and then it goes around that. It's really massive, and it has reduced even the amount of time women spend on the farm. And so I think the biggest thing here is modern farming technologies to exist. And what we need is massive investment into those technologies that have worked. And I can list a lot of them right now going on in Africa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, both of you. And yeah, I see there is already at least two questions in the chat, and I would like to wrap up the discussion. I know that we had originally planned to do an additional question, a very important one, about the increase attractiveness in the agricultural and the food systems in Africa for youth, for young farmers. But you have partly addressed that already, both of you. So let's go to the last question, really wrapping up the discussion. So we have heard from you about the challenges, but also encouraging examples of already transformed food systems, including some young farmers examples, and you've given recommendations, and we have seen some solutions that we can and that must be done to transform global and especially also local agri-food systems. But before we open the floor to the questions answers, the final question to the two of you would be, what can we here from Germany, Europe, contribute to the transformation of local agri-food systems in Africa? Maybe this time, Rowlands, you can start.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to speak to the context. There has to be a deliberate choice and decision to invest to a new context about hunger and poverty. We seem to be having the same conversation about hunger and poverty over and over again. What we need now is a completely new mindset. I don't know who can choose to invest into a context setting space for a new conversation about hunger. What do I mean by that? What I mean there is we need to have a conversation, a context that does not tolerate hunger, that says hunger is unacceptable, the same way we said one day about slavery. That's what we need to create. It will cost an investment. So it might not be directly into increasing food production from X to Y. But you know what? That type of investment will be clearly for a higher return in food security in the future. So I would like to see a generation which does not tolerate hunger anymore. And further to that, I would like to see a food system that does not only end hunger, because to me that is no longer sufficient. Ending hunger is no longer a sufficient agenda. What looks like a really sufficient agenda to me as we stand right now is an approach, a food system that does not only end hunger, but it creates a new world where hunger will not exist. In the first place, hunger will not be generated. So the ending hunger to me appears like a conversation of, okay, allow it to be created. That's why we allow systems of inequality and all that, which actually create hunger and keeps it in place. Then we come in to fix them. We need a complete investment to create a new context in this world. That's a space you can perform, you can take there. Okay, I also like to speak to, we need this change and we need it now. Now, I know this is not an easy call because all of us are used to, I made an investment to increase production from X to Y. And so to invest in the context setting is not an easy agenda, but it creates a return that is going to surprise all of us in the future. It actually makes the space fertile for all other investments that want to move mechanical X to Y. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Migende. Your answer, please.
Yeah, well, I already mentioned the framework, what investment need in a country. External investment or investment from the countries. So the governance in a country is a very important thing. That doesn't mean that we say, okay, you have to rule your country like this or that. What in the moment in Germany we like to do to say other people how they have to live. That's not the point. The point is that there's a stable political situation, that is a fair and independent legal system, that is a good education and university framework. And Roland is totally right. The population growth will take place in Africa in the next 20, 30 years. So that means even for investment, this is a growing market. But if you want to come into a market, you have to be in the country. So and that's really important. And to my dear fellow colleagues from the economy, we have, or from the media, we have to stop to talk about Africa as a problem. So economy investment is a psychological thing. And if we always talk only about the problems in Africa, we will not increase the investment. So Africa is a continent of chances, is a continent of growth, of resources, of human resources. And it makes a lot of fun to be in Africa because there are a lot of friendly people, good culture, good food, and all that stuff. So Roland, if you talk about a fundamental mental change, from my point of view, this has happened in Germany very fast, that we have another view on Africa. In the moment, we only talk about migrants and all that stuff. That's wrong. We have to talk about the beautiness and the chances in Africa, especially in the media.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much. Now we have only a few minutes left for the open discussion, questions and answers, but that has been very rich, a lot to digest, but I'm sure there will be a few questions. But before we go into the questions, Ursula, I think you want to summarize and introduce the discussion.
Yeah, okay. Yes, you should hear me now. Thank you very much for this wonderful, lively discussion about a very interdisciplinary problem or situation. And you said something, Rowland, which I really liked. You said hunger is totally unacceptable and should be untolerated. This was one I really liked of this conversation, beside all the technical aspects. The other thing which stands in my mind are the figures you mentioned, Vincent. If we really do transform our food systems, it will cost us 400 billion US dollars, I would imagine. If we do not do it, it costs us 12 trillion. One has to think about these figures, and this is what I also liked on the statement of Jörg Migende, who said we should not regard those food security system as a small business, but it's a very, very big business. One thing, of course, we from the Hunger Project, and let me say that as a second chairwoman, is that we support, of course, the communities and the especially the women, and that 80% of the women produce in the development countries produce food and are responsible for the production. I think this is something very exceptional. I noted some of the statements of Jörg Migende, which I also liked, that there should be a good cooperative law and audits, and of course the production hasn't met the consumption, so we should take also the food waste in consideration. And of course, the mega farms, that should be also in the hand of the smallholders. And of course, the title of the song, No Farmers, No Future, that shows us the whole circle of food security systems that should be watched and worked on from either side, from the industrial side, from the political side that needs stability, and of course good laws, and of course of the humanity side, that means what can we do to support all especially the families, the women, the children, and the farmland cooperatives. And there we come to the Hunger Project. And our vision is very short. It's to end hunger by 2030. There's not much time left. These are barely 6 years, and I really doubt at this moment that we even come close to it, with this staggering number of 783 million who are still starving. But we empower the people, and we build up resilience, we build up courage, and we build up creativity for strengthening the communities. And I think this is also very, very important, not to watch only the big systems, but the small systems, the families, the villages, the farms, etc. So we encourage that, and we also engage with governments. We support, of course, women as entrepreneurs, because they are really ideal for doing that. And yes, we have to use modern technology to get the young people to engage not only in digital businesses, but also in the stability of the secure food systems in Africa. And by engaging in this mission of the Hunger Project, I would like to ask everybody to continue or to start supporting us, because we have a very, very great way ahead us, but it's also a lot of work. And as the figures of Vincent show, we need a lot of financial support. We need to get the systems together, and to really encourage everybody to change the situation in all the development countries. By that, I would like to stop, because I have so many more points I noticed, but I would recommend to everybody to watch this session we had today, because it was so interesting. And thank you very, very much, Jörg, Migende, and Rowlands, Kaotcha, for this great insight from two different sides, two different views, but at the end, we all want the same thing. We want a world without hunger, the world without poverty. And I think this is a great chance for our humanity to survive, only if we get all sides together. With that, I thank everybody for the participation today, and I wish you a good pre-Christmas season. We are almost in it in Germany, and I hope to see you to one of our next webinars, which we probably will be at the end of November or beginning of December. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you also, Ursula and Vincent.
Yeah. Thank you, Ursula. So I see we come to the end of the webinar, actually, but
we have two questions in the chat.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Yes. In the chat,
I will give to Suna, and Suna will do that.
We have 5 minutes more. Thank you, Jörg and Rowlands. So I want to post them short, because I think they're pretty interesting. I think the first question was of Gerald Cato. It is regarding the financing and the credits, especially since due to the climate change, the insecurity and the fragility of the agricultural sector has increased. It's harder to get credits and financing for agricultural projects. What do you think about this? How can we, is there maybe an approach for a solution, or is this a solvable issue, or maybe, what are your thoughts on that, Rowlands and Jörg? I don't know who wants to start. Okay, Jörg, please.
Yeah, I already wrote it into the chat. Well, we have this concept of microfinancing, which means that the whole village is liable for one lender, yeah, or to establish a system of cooperative banks, which works in a similar way. And the German Raiffeisen and Genossenschaftsverband make some projects internationally to establish these systems together with governments or with the local organizations. So there are solutions. Yeah, but at the end of the day, with money, for example, from the German KfW, you have to convince them that they support, that they give small credits as well, because normally they look only after big investments, but it's possible, like we did in Zambia for tractors, for small tractors and implements. So there are good ways to exchange here experiences and to establish these systems. Well, and regarding a sustainability criteria as a base for financing, yeah, that's an issue. We have this with the taxonomy in Europe as well. Generally a good thing, but in detail, not really sufficient to make investment in your company for reducing CO2, for example, because you are either bad or you're either good for some reasons. Yeah, another discussion for days. Yeah, but especially for Africa, I would recommend microfinance schemes or cooperative banks.
Okay, Rowlands.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have to add some, or you have to add something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they are. So beside tied to microfinancing, there are crop insurance for smallholder farmers that you can actually introduce, and we have seen them being experimented in Africa. They really worked well, and those are the flexibility on those types of insurance, flexible insurances that work with such groups of people, proper investment in proper forecasting, so that farmers make the right choices. They know where they should invest in. So that proper forecasting is not only on weather, but also on markets that will exist there. We've seen in place where farmers, because last year soya beans was selling very high on the international market, everyone shifts to soya beans growing. And then the following year, completely low, and everyone is crying. So that type of investing into that type of knowledge management and forecasting for smallholder farmers to have that type of information so they make the right choices. Diversification is the other part. And so there are so many different ways we can actually handle that particular mystery that Gerard spoke about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think both of the answers fit quite well together. And one of aspect of your answer, Rowlands, was also related to another question we had, and I want to pose. Diana said there's another issue with literacy, and even when we also struggle in education, how shall we educate in this financial know-how the people need and the modern farming methods? How do we bridge the gap here to come to a good solution? Quick.
There are great models happening. Lead farmer models, for example, where I know in most African countries, the ratio of extension workers and the farmers is really skewed. You have 1 over 1,000 of farmers. How do you build that education between that? And there are these different models that are being experimented in, lead farming model and all that. So that's one. The other part is, let's not look at the issue of hunger as food alone and isolate it from everything else. Okay, so we need to look at the integration and make sure that issues of education, issues of health and all that are part of the whole package that we have to address the issue of hunger. So the holistic approach helps. So you bring in education. And how do we bring, for example, agriculture into the literacy program that happens in the villages where we are? So that holistic approach would take care, would start solving that question that Diana is asking.
Okay, I see Mr. Migende. I don't know, maybe if you want to add something, we have to make it afterwards or in another session.
I totally agree. Rowlands, so right. Thanks.
Too, and we don't want to steal anyone's time. We thank a lot for the being that you've taken part in the session in this webinar. Thank you from my side, and also I think I can speak here for all the other participants. It was really interesting, and thanks a lot for being here. Suna, do you want to add something for the closing?
Yes, I wish we had more time. Thank you all very much for your comments and contributions, which we did not have time to get them all to, but I especially want to thank all of our speakers today for providing your insights and perspectives on this very complex but also fascinating topic. I hope we can set up another webinar with a similar topic in the future. I thank you all very, very much for today. Unfortunately, our speakers are tight on time and must leave now, but we will have another webinar coming up this year, which we will send out a save the date soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Bye. Thank you, Hunger Projekt.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rowland.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Migende.